Scary telling.
As a concerned parent, I hated seeing my son struggle with his fear of monsters. It started a few weeks ago when he saw a scary movie at a friend's house. Since then, he refused to sleep alone in his room and would constantly complain about the monster under his bed. I tried everything from night lights to reading bedtime stories, but nothing worked. That's when I heard about anti-monster spray. I went to the store and bought a can of the spray, thinking it would solve our problem. When I got home, my son was excited to see what the spray could do. We sprayed it all around his room, under his bed, and in his closet. I even sprayed a little bit on him, just to be safe. He seemed to like the idea of the spray and finally fell asleep without any trouble. But that night, I woke up to a strange noise. It sounded like scratching coming from my son's room. I thought it was just my imagination, but then I heard my son's voice calling out to me. I rushed to his room, but he wasn't there. I searched the entire house, but he was nowhere to be found. I started to panic and checked the closet, thinking he might be hiding in there. As I opened the closet door, a strange smell hit me. It was a smell of something rotten and decayed. I turned on the light, and my heart sank. There was my son's lifeless body lying on the floor, covered in dirt and scratches. I screamed and tried to run out of the room, but the door wouldn't budge. I was trapped. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. How could this happen? I remember feeling like I was in a dream, a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. It was then that I realized the horrible truth. The monster that my son was so afraid of was real, and it had taken him away from me. I tried to calm myself down and think rationally. Maybe there was still a chance to save my son, to find a way out of this nightmare. I knew I had to find a way to escape the room and seek help. But for now, I was stuck, with my dead son and the monster lurking somewhere in the room. The anti-monster spray that I had relied on had failed me, and now I was facing a horror beyond my wildest imagination. The shock of finding my son's body in the closet was almost too much to bear. I was trembling with fear and disbelief, struggling to come to terms with what had happened. As I tried to run out of the room, I realized that the door was locked from the outside. Panic set in as I realized that I was trapped in the room with my son's body and the monster that had killed him. I tried everything to get the door open, pounding on it with all my might and screaming for help. But no one came. The room was soundproof, and there was no way for anyone to hear me. The only sound was the scratching noise coming from the walls, which seemed to grow louder and more insistent with each passing moment. As I paced back and forth in the room, my mind raced with questions. Who or what was the monster that had killed my son? How did it get into the house, and why was it after my family? And most importantly, how was I going to get out of this room alive? I began to search the room for any tools or objects that might help me escape or defend myself against the monster. I found a screwdriver and a hammer, but they were no match for the monster's strength and speed. I also searched for a phone or a way to call for help, but there was no signal in the room, and the door was too thick to break through. As the hours turned into days, I became more and more desperate. I tried to ration the food and water that I had, but it wouldn't last forever. I tried to sleep, but the scratching noise and the stench of my son's body made it impossible to rest. Despite my fear and exhaustion, I knew that I had to find a way to escape the room and seek help. I tried to think of any possible escape routes or weak spots in the walls, but they all seemed impenetrable. I even considered using the anti-monster spray again, but I knew deep down that it was useless against this monster. The scratching noise seemed to grow louder and more frenzied with each passing day, as if the monster knew that I was trapped and was taunting me. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. It felt like I was losing my mind, trapped in this room with the monster and my son's decaying body. Days turned into weeks, and I began to lose track of time. I didn't know how long I had been trapped in the room, but it felt like an eternity. My body ached, and my mind was numb from the stress and fear. I knew that I had to find a way to escape before it was too late. I had to honor my son's memory and fight for my own survival. The monster might have taken my son, but I wouldn't let it take me too. As the days turned into weeks, I began to lose all hope of escaping the room. I felt like a prisoner, trapped with my son's body and the monster that had killed him. The scratching noise never stopped, and I began to feel like it was taunting me, driving me insane. But one day, I heard a different sound coming from the wall. It was a low growl, almost like an animal. My heart started pounding in my chest, and I realized that the monster was close. I didn't know what to do, so I grabbed the screwdriver and the hammer, the only weapons I had. Suddenly, the scratching stopped, and there was silence. I could hear my own heartbeat, pounding in my ears. Then, I saw it. The monster emerged from the wall, its eyes glowing with a malevolent red light. Its skin was slimy and scaly, like a reptile, and its claws were razor sharp. I froze, my weapons useless in my hands. The monster lunged at me, and I fell backward, hitting my head on the floor. I felt a sharp pain, and then everything went black. When I woke up, the monster was gone, and I was alone in the room. My head was throbbing with pain, but I managed to sit up and take stock of my situation. I knew that I had to be more careful and find a way to defend myself against the monster. I started to look for other weapons or tools that could help me, but the room was almost empty. There was a small window on the wall, but it was too high for me to reach. I tried to break it with the hammer, but it was too strong. I knew that I needed a better plan. Days passed, and I heard the monster again, scratching at the walls. I could feel its presence, lurking in the shadows. I tried to stay alert and prepared, but it was almost impossible to fight against a creature that seemed to know every inch of the room. One day, I found a small hole in the wall, barely big enough for me to fit my hand through. I peered inside and saw a dark tunnel, leading who knew where. It was a risky move, but I knew that I had to explore it and find out where it led. I crawled through the tunnel, feeling the damp earth under my fingers. It was a tight fit, but I managed to squeeze through, my heart pounding with fear and anticipation. When I emerged on the other side, I saw a small room filled with strange objects and symbols. It was like nothing I had ever seen before, and I felt like I had stumbled upon a secret cult or ritual. But before I could explore any further, I heard the monster behind me, its breath hot on my neck. I turned around, ready to fight, but the monster was too fast. It knocked me to the ground, its claws tearing at my flesh. I fought back with all my strength, swinging the hammer and the screwdriver, but it was too powerful. As I lay on the ground, bleeding and battered, I realized that the monster was too strong for me to defeat. I had to find another way to escape, to find help, to honor my son's memory. I had to keep fighting, even if it seemed impossible. After my encounter with the monster in the hidden room, I realized that I had to find another way out of the room. I was determined to escape and seek help, but as the days passed, it became increasingly clear that it was impossible. The scratching noise continued, and the monster seemed to be one step ahead of me at every turn. As the weeks turned into months, I began to feel like I was losing my mind. The isolation, the fear, and the constant threat of the monster were taking their toll on my sanity. I started talking to myself, imagining conversations with my family and even my dead son. It was like I had created my own alternate reality, a world where I wasn't trapped in a room with a monster, but instead surrounded by the people I loved. But as the days passed, even that world began to crumble. The constant scratching noise and the stench of my son's body were always there, a reminder of the horror I was living in. I began to have nightmares, imagining the monster attacking me or my son coming back to life, only to be killed again. It was like my mind was playing cruel tricks on me, torturing me with my worst fears. I started to lose track of time, not knowing whether it was day or night, or how long I had been trapped in the room. I stopped eating, barely drinking any water, and stopped trying to escape. It was like I had given up, accepting my fate as a prisoner in my own personal hell. But even in my darkest moments, I knew that I had to hold on to my sanity to fight against the monster and the darkness that threatened to consume me. I started to exercise, doing push-ups and sit-ups to keep my body strong. I even started to meditate, focusing on my breathing and trying to find inner peace. As I sat in the room, alone with my thoughts, I started to see things that weren't there. Shadows moved across the walls, strange shapes formed out of the darkness. It was like the monster was playing games with my mind, trying to break me down and drive me mad. But I refused to give in. I held onto my sanity, even as the scratching noise grew louder and the monster seemed to be closing in. I imagined myself as a warrior, fighting against the darkness and the monster with all my strength. One day, I heard a noise outside the room, a sound that was different from the scratching noise. It was like someone was trying to break down the door to rescue me. I screamed for help, but the noise stopped and there was silence once again. It was then that I realized that the monster was playing a new game, toying with my hope and my sanity. I couldn't trust anything anymore, not even my own senses. Despite the despair and the darkness that surrounded me, I knew that I had to hold on to my humanity, to keep fighting and hoping for a way out of the room. Even if it seemed impossible, I had to hold on to my son's memory and fight for my own survival. As the weeks turned into months, I continued to fight against the monster and the darkness that threatened to consume me. But despite my efforts, I knew that I was running out of time. My food and water supplies were dwindling, and my body was growing weaker every day. One day, I woke up to find that the scratching noise had stopped. There was silence in the room, a sense of foreboding that hung heavy in the air. I knew that something was different, that the monster was planning something. And then, I saw it. The monster emerged from the wall, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. But this time, I was ready. I had prepared myself for this final confrontation, and I was determined to fight with all my strength. The monster lunged at me, its claws slashing through the air. I dodged its attack, swinging the hammer and the screwdriver with all my might. The monster was fast and agile, but I was determined to defend myself and honor my son's memory. As we fought, I realized that the monster was not just a mindless creature, but a sentient being capable of strategy and intelligence. It was like it was taunting me, playing with me, and enjoying the struggle. But I refused to give up. I fought with all my strength, using everything at my disposal. And then, I saw it. The weak spot in the wall, the one that led to the outside world. With a burst of energy, I lunged at the weak spot, hitting it with the hammer and the screwdriver. The wall cracked, and light poured into the room. I could hear the sound of footsteps outside, and I knew that help was finally here. The monster roared, its claws tearing at my flesh. But I refused to give up. With one final blow, I broke through the weak spot and emerged into the sunlight. As I stumbled out of the room, I saw a group of people standing outside, police officers, and my family. They rushed to my side, helping me to my feet and leading me away from the room. And then, I saw it. The monster, in all its terrifying glory, emerging from the wall. But this time, it was different. It seemed weaker, more vulnerable. The police officers surrounded the monster, their guns drawn. And then, with one final shot, the monster was dead. Its body crumbled to the ground, a mass of slimy scales and claws. I collapsed to the ground, tears streaming down my face. It was over. The nightmare was finally over. My family gathered around me, holding me close, and I knew that I was safe. As we drove away from the house, I looked back one last time. The room was empty, the monster dead. But my son's memory would live on forever. And I knew that I had fought for him and for myself. The darkness had been defeated, and